Have you ever thought about what it would feel like to no longer have a home or to become unhoused? Stay with us for a discussion about homeless in St. Louis coming up on this episode of The Issues. I'm Sarah Bernard, host of The Issues. Thanks for staying with us. According to the city's Continuum of Care, about 1,250 people are homeless on a given night in St. Louis. Thankfully, there are several organizations doing their part to help with this issue. But first, let's hear from the director of Magdala House programs, Garfield Duckett.
The homeless issue in St. Louis is just like every other city in the United States. It's a problem. And it's something that we as a city of St. Louis, we can work. We can work to try to minimize or at least eliminate it. There's a number of different social and environmental factors that causes homelessness. You have mental health, you have substance abuse, you have evictions, you have people who are transient and some kind of way get stuck from one place to another. You have people who have just made some poor financial decisions. You have individuals who are going through a divorce, just some very difficult and real issues that our people are facing today. I think that in what any social service professional does is to try to create empowerment for people. And so you ask me personally, I like to serve. I want to serve. I want to hopefully provide services to individuals that may be battling homelessness or any other ailment that prevents them from enjoying a quality of life like you and I. So I find it very satisfying to work hard every day, hopefully to put people in a better position, and that is stable housing.
Thank you, Garfield, for your input. And we have in our studio DeAndre Commons, who is the Unhoused Case Manager Coordinator for Affinia Healthcare, and Dr. Michael Meehan, the Chief Care Officer for Catholic Charities of St. Louis. Thank you both for taking the time to help shed some light on this very important issue. Dr. Meehan, let's start with you and tell us a little bit about what you do in our community to help with the homeless or unhoused situation.
Certainly. Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of St. Louis, we work to provide healing, help, and hope to all folks in need throughout the 11 counties of the Archdiocese, and that includes the city of St. Louis. Of our 60-plus programs, I would say perhaps a little bit less than half focus either directly on housing and housing issues or indirectly with those who are at risk of being unhoused.
So it's really the biggest issue, it sounds like, facing our community right now.
I think it could easily be argued it's the #1 issue facing not only the entirety of the Archdiocese, but really across the United States.
Across the country, absolutely. And the Catholic Charities, like you said, works in all 11 counties. And the unhoused homeless situation exists in all of those counties.
Absolutely.
And is growing.
And is growing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. DeAndre, let's go to you. So I want to talk about you're daily working with the people in our community who are in this situation, and you have a very important job. You've been doing it for over 15 years.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell us what you do to help those in our community.
Well, I'm the case manager coordinator at Affinia, and one of my primary goals is to make sure everyone that's unhoused have access to primary care, behavioral health, and MAT services. And just because you're unhoused does not mean you don't have access to these. So I'm embedded in encampments, shelters in St. Louis, just to reassure the unhoused that they're not forgotten, especially when it comes to primary care.
So you're a welcome sight.
Most definitely.
Yeah, everybody knows you. And that's a good thing. And your department has the word unhoused
Yes.
in it. And oftentimes we regular people refer to the people without homes as the homeless. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit from your perspective the difference between those two words and why it's important that we move away from homeless.
It's the stigma when you hear homelessness, and unhoused just sounds better to me, politically better. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're all a situation away from being unhoused. It's a situation that's going on in St. Louis that's rapidly evolving. So it's just a hard, tough issue. And I'm glad Affinia Healthcare has stood forward to have a medical team there to help the unhoused.
Yeah, so unhoused, and you made a really important statement that we are all a situation away from facing this
Yes.
in our lives. I mean, with our economy today and all the things that are changing, it's a reality.
True.
So, Dr. Meehan, talk about that. Talk about the things that could change in someone's life to lead to them being without a home.
Absolutely. It's not merely, we used to think, I think about being unhoused as purely about income, about poverty. And certainly those in poverty are at far higher risk. But the reality, the difference between stable and poverty is thinner and thinner.
Mm-hmm.
And so a job loss, a divorce, a return from deployment in our armed forces, all of those sorts of fairly normative things can be the trigger that leads someone to being unhoused or at being in extreme risk for being unhoused.
And why would you say this situation is growing? And it has been growing at quite a rapid rate for the past 7-8 years?
Oh, yeah, certainly, and arguably longer than that.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously it's a complex issue. Some of it is the movement towards the middle, economically speaking, as housing stock is harder and harder to come by, housing prices are much, much higher, and so stable, safe housing is harder and harder to afford. Jobs and pay haven't necessarily risen in the same way. Assistance and investments from government and others are trying to keep up, but that is also a challenge. And so folks who weren't necessarily at imminent risk of being unhoused or perhaps had never worried that they might be without a home are now worried and have reason to be worried. And this, we're also on the heels of an international pandemic that didn't help us in that regard.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. That was a disaster on many levels for many people. So in unhoused, we think of the encampments and the homeless shelters. Are they still called homeless shelters, or are we moving away from that too?
Well, we can't change that, but I think it's still called homeless shelters,
Okay.
but it just sounds better for Affinia to say unhoused and
Yeah,
homeless. It just
yeah.
sounds
I just
better.
want to make sure we're getting it right because
Yeah.
it's important. You point out some good reasons. So we have the encampments, the shelters, but there's other people who are unhoused that we don't see. So where are they?
Sleeping in cars, they call them vacos, vacant houses, sleeping up under bridges. They're everywhere. The local gas stations, you see them standing out panhandling. There's not enough drop-in centers in places, so they have nothing to do but walk around through St. Louis all day, unfortunately.
And do you have any sense of how long, and you might also want to weigh in on this, Dr. Meehan, how long people are on average unhoused?
Well, I met my first client about 14 years ago, and he's still at the shelter. So I think better case management and things like that can make a difference. The lack of behavioral health in St. Louis is another issue. So it's just, there's no number. Like I said, I've been knowing him for 15 years, but I want to say last week I saw the first 17-year-old unhoused client that I've seen in a long time. They're getting younger and older, so there's no timeline.
Dr. Meehan, how does mental illness and substance abuse, how does that weigh into the unhoused situation that we have?
It's a great question. I think I would answer in terms of risk factors. And the more risk factors an individual or a family or a household has, the more likely it is perhaps that they would struggle in this way or would struggle more mightily to secure housing once they're unhoused. And so services provided by ministries like St. Patrick's Center are the whole continuum of care. So it's helping folks avoid being unhoused. That's a big part of what we do, and helping folks after they are unhoused. And some folks are unhoused chronically and have been perhaps intermittently for many years. Others a very short time, and we're able to rapidly rehouse those folks, get them back into stable housing, get them the whatever kind of supports or financial assistance, and it's a temporary thing, right? It's a crisis in their life. We help them through that crisis. They get out on the other side and they're doing better. And for others, and that's where I think things like substance abuse, where chronic and persistent mental illness comes in, for others that challenge is greater. And so for those specifically who have persistent and extreme mental illness, who struggle with substance addiction, those sorts of things. It's just more obstacles in the way.
Right.
Right, because resources are going to feed an addiction, or because the symptoms of someone's illness make it difficult for them to manage in an ordinary setting, or because the symptoms of their illness make it hard for them to work with others or trust others to provide care for them, a host of reasons. But we do see a disproportionate number of folks with those struggles with both mental illness and or substance abuse and addiction issues in the homeless population.
Okay, so what do we do? Where do we go from here? So the way I look at it is we can solve the problem at the beginning before it becomes a problem, and then there's going to be some situations that they're already unhoused and we have solutions there. So let's talk about, again, from your experiences, how do we work to eliminate the problem in the first place? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know about eliminating the problem. Like he said, you could lose your job today or tomorrow. You could have a family member. You just never know. But it's good to have things in place to where if I do become unhoused, I can go to St. Patrick's Center. I can call 211. It's certain services that St. Louis have that, unfortunately, if you do become unhoused, you have a medical team at Affinia Healthcare that'll take care of your medical needs, your MAT needs, your behavioral health needs. St. Patrick's Center, you can call 211, get placed at a shelter. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about 211. This is really important, and it's not something that maybe everyone knows about. It's your everyday, but it's not everybody's everyday. So tell us about 211. Where did that come from? Where do those phone calls go?
They go to the St. Patrick's Center, 211 or 314-802-5444 is how I refer a lot of clients to St. Patrick's Center. So you'll basically call to get certain demographics from you and place you in a shelter if a shelter bed is available. But you really do need to go through the housing hotline, 211.
So that's 211, and so is that answer 24/7?
I'm on the opposite end of that spectrum. I just refer clients
Okay,
over,
so you
I
don't know the
too
logistics.
much about it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's presume that someone's answering those calls. Do you know anything about that, Dr. Meehan?
211 is a resource, a hotline and connector, not merely for those who are facing a housing crisis, but for any crisis. And now that's operated via the United Way of Greater St. Louis and has a really broad reach. But with regard to housing, the idea is that we adopt, because of funding through the federal government and initiatives that have been proven successful, we funnel folks through a single point of entry so we can assess and do so in a standardized way, and then prioritize those who are at greatest risk for bad outcomes and make sure that they're getting intervention quickly and are getting into housing.
So there's so many resources available in our community, obviously for the unhoused, which is amazing and needed. So when you're out interacting, and both of you are interacting with the unhoused in our community, so are you finding that for the most part people are receptive to the services? When you suggest that they call 211, are they making the call? Is there resistance, and if there is resistance, why would that be?
They make the call, but a lot of the unhoused have issues with telephones and getting access to calling 211. And as long as the shelters and 211 is on the same page with shelter beds, of course, there's no pushback because people want to be off the streets. So if you tell a person, call this number, they can help you find a shelter, find a place, of course they're going to call. So I don't think we get too much pushback from that. They look forward to the services.
Okay, good. Anything to add on that?
Well, I think where there might be frustration and hesitance is the need far outstrips the resources that we have available at times. Housing stock is extraordinarily difficult to come by, particularly affordable housing stock. And so the fact that you call the hotline doesn't mean instantaneously there'll be housing available. In fact, it probably won't be in an immediate sense. But the more quickly someone is engaged, a family, an individual, the more quickly then we can begin the tasks of getting them connected.
Okay, very good. I really appreciate both of you and your time and being here to help our community members and to share your professionalism and expertise. It's really been fantastic to have you here. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll be joined by two more guests to talk about the unhoused issue in St. Louis. We'll be right back.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, today's topic is homeless in St. Louis, and we're now joined by Dr. Anthony Dagstino, the CEO of Peter and Paul Community Services, and Dr. Adam Pearson, the Director of the Department of Human Services in St. Louis. Let's start with Dr. Pearson and tell us a little bit about what you do. You're under the direction of the mayor's office and working specifically on this issue of the unhoused in St. Louis.
That's correct. So thank you for having me first and foremost. So the Department of Human Services has 6 different divisions under our auspices. One is the Division of Homeless Services, which is what we're talking about today. The other is the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging. Then we have the Office of Youth and Family Programs, the Office on the Disabled, the Office of Veterans Affairs, and then a fiscal division that helps to manage our books and all the financial controls for the millions of dollars that we send into the community each year.
Very good. And so what do you specifically do in your day-to-day that addresses the unhoused situation that we've been talking about earlier in the show?
Yes, email back and forth with Anthony.
Yes, that's right.
No, but
And you guys work closely together.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time in our department thinking through how we can coordinate funding in collaboration with what's called the Continuum of Care, which is a consortium of homeless services organizations in St. Louis. And so working with the COC and with other individual providers to make sure that they're receiving the funding that we're sending out for services. That's the primary role of our work. But then we also have an outreach team, 5 client services coordinators who do outreach around the city in collaboration with several other outreach organizations as well.
Would you say that the unhoused situation in our city is front and center in City Hall and the mayor's office in terms of needing attention or being addressed?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's one of several different issues that obviously City Hall is working on. But as far as DHS goes, the work of the Homeless Services Division does take up quite a bit of attention just because, as we know, the issues with the unhoused are in our face. We see individuals every day on the streets, perhaps in encampments. And so there's a need to make sure that we're providing services and coordinating care for those individuals.
And do you feel that it is a growing problem? We talked about that earlier, that the work that you are doing is going to lessen the issue as we go into the future? I'm sure that's the goal.
That's the goal, so fingers crossed. And I think there are a number of different solutions that I'm sure we'll get into, but the idea is that individuals on the street face a significantly higher risk of mortality and morbidity, traffic safety incidents, because folks may be out panhandling. And so there's a lot of risk with being unhoused. And so what we want to do as a department and as a division of homeless services is make sure that we're providing that care and follow-up needed with organizations that are doing the boots on the ground work to provide all of those life-saving services.
Yeah, and so you're with the city, and then Anthony, you're with St. Peter and St. Paul Community Services. And what I love, and what we've been talking about this whole show, is all the different community groups that come together to help and address the situation in St. Louis. So tell us a little bit about you and what your organization is doing.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So Peter and Paul is back in 1981, so over 40 years ago, there was a situation in Soulard. There was a gentleman who actually froze to death during the winter. So the community came together in the basement of Peter and Paul Church and decided to create a shelter to keep people in out of the cold, and said, this is enough. We're not going to allow this to happen anymore. And from there, over the last 4 decades, it's grown. And it's grown to meet the need, and the need has changed over time. And a lot of it's not just sheltering. We still do that. That's our flagship, still in that basement of the church. But it's also to expand to deal with housing. Because we obviously want to shelter people out of the cold and make sure they're not going to have all their needs are being met. But while we're doing that, we want to immediately try to find services and housing for them in the community so they can have some sustainability.
Okay, so moving them out of the unhoused situation into more of a permanent situation where they can move on with their lives?
Yes, always the goal
Okay.
is trying to work towards stability and permanency and housing. Housing is always the solution, but it's not an either or. It's a both. We have to have enough sheltering to meet the immediate needs with people on the street who are literally unhoused, and then we have to have enough housing to move people in. It's almost that pipeline. And the problem is in most cities, like here in St. Louis, as Adam knows and your other guests, we oftentimes have it's clogged. We don't have enough affordable housing, enough housing stock on the back end to move people through the pipeline very quickly.
Yeah.
People shouldn't be in shelters for months and months and months. They should be there for nights or a couple weeks while we're moving them into a more sustainable place.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily happening
No.
due to the shortage of housing options. And it's interesting you mentioned other cities. So how much interaction do you all have in your day-to-day with similar people in similar roles in other big cities? I would imagine that comes into play.
Well, just from the city perspective, the mayor and I traveled to Los Angeles in the fall for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and the focus of that meeting was work on the unhoused. And so at that meeting, and there are many other meetings like that throughout the country, we get an opportunity to engage with other human services leaders, other mayors, other individuals from mayor's office who are leading initiatives to focus on the unhoused population. A lot of the issues we're facing as a city right now are very similar to the issues that other cities are facing regarding the unhoused population. Anthony mentioned that there's this pipeline issue, right? It gets clogged up, and that's the case here as well. And so we're able to take some of these best practices from other cities and try to apply them here.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Where does St. Louis weigh, if you even know, in the unhoused situation across the country? Are we pretty average for what you've seen?
For our size city, we're pretty average.
Okay.
We're not like a New York City where there's more than 100,000 individuals who might be unhoused.
Yeah.
Our point in time count from 2023 indicated that there was 1,252 people who were in our shelter system on a particular day. And so that is it's a smaller number than some of these other major, larger cities, but at any given time there might be around 100, maybe a little bit over 100 individuals who are unsheltered. And so I think that's an issue that we're working very closely with providers to try to address.
Yeah, it's amazing all the work that you all are doing behind the scenes. Anthony, talk to us about the shortage of housing and what's being done to address that.
Yeah, so, the COVID was a horrible pandemic that really had massive repercussions and impact on the entire community. We're still feeling it today. If there was one silver lining for the homeless services community, is it did bring up quite a bit of resources that were then distributed. And Adam and his team and the city have been working to get those monies out the door. And I can't imagine what it would be like without those resources. I mean, money is not going to completely solve this issue, but as I tell people, any issue is a little easier to solve when you have more funds. So we need to continue to find ways to bring more funds, especially federal dollars, into our community. Other communities, I would say, oftentimes we can look at best practices who probably do a better job at bringing in some federal funds. But as us as a community, the Continuum of Care, working with the city, we all need to work together, especially as the ARPA money goes away, because it's going to be gone in the next couple of years, to make sure we have the resources to build and to create more affordable housing to, like we said, make sure people can get into there and become more sustainable.
Yeah. Now, at St. Peter and Paul, the shelter, how many beds are there?
So right now there's 60.
Okay.
We're getting ready to. Actually, Adam and I have a meeting tomorrow to talk a little bit more about the details of buying another property that's much bigger. We're looking to expand. And it's not only to expand from 60 to 100 beds for emergency shelter, but it's also to expand to having dozens of beds for transitional housing, to have potentially 15 permanent supportive housing units. And there's other opportunities. We just need to make sure that we are moving forward and creating those opportunities.
So how quickly can those things happen once the approvals have been made?
relatively quickly. I know there's a lot of projects in the pipeline. I know in the last couple of days, the mayor just came out with talking about more tiny homes, expansion there. I think all of these things can happen this year and into next, and especially as we're trying to get those ARPA dollars spent.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about earlier in this discussion moving people through the pipeline and out of it more quickly. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that, and what can the community do to help?
So I think knowing the issue, if you're watching this right now, this is the first step, right? Because you're learning a little bit more, you're interested enough to know this. I would say spread the word, tell people about this. We oftentimes see it on the streets, right? I'm in one of those situations where I was actually just talking to my father about this. He's a mechanical engineer, and when he tells people that, they usually don't come in and know much about it, right? But when you tell someone you're in homeless services, they have an issue, they have an opinion. They've thought about this. They see people on the street. They see people's panhandling. They want to know, and they're interested in this. It's a human issue. And so I really think that we can come together and find some solutions. St. Louis, I'm not from here, but we oftentimes have this siloed approach. And I think that we are at a time where people are trying to work a little bit more together, getting in the same boat and rowing in the same direction. And that's the only way we can have an impact.
Yeah, and when you talk to people that maybe aren't as familiar with the topic as you both are, what's the general emotion or feeling? Is it of curiosity? Is it fear? Is it we want to help, we want to serve? What do you experience?
Well, I'd love to hear what Adam thinks. I think you get an array depending on the person. Some people are just tired of it, compassion fatigue. They just want to see it ended. They want to see it stopped. Some people are really in the trenches, and it just, you have this huge array of questions and emotions that you see people come to you with.
Yeah, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just very briefly, I think there is some fear that comes with it. There's a little bit of misunderstanding about who an unhoused individual is. In short, somebody who is unhoused is just like me. And it's just like you, and it's just like any viewers. These are individuals who may or may not have substance use issues or mental illnesses or chronic health conditions, but they require some assistance, perhaps, to get back on their feet. Maybe it's not permanent assistance, maybe it's just short-term assistance, but something, a nudge to get them back on their feet. And I think that's what St. Louis is doing a good job of providing.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate both of you and our earlier guests for coming and just helping to educate us. And it's amazing to know how much work is being done behind the scenes to alleviate this issue, to help address it, to move people more quickly through that pipeline and back into a stable situation. So thank you both for all that you're doing. And we were going to hear once again from Garfield Duckett of Magdala House and what they're doing for the homeless.
We are a company that serves intellectual and developmentally disabled individuals as now those who are experiencing homelessness. We care on purpose. We really want to help individuals secure income, right? Reliable income and permanent stable housing. How do you would actually get into our program here at Tiny Homes, which is, of course, a transitional housing setup, is through some sort of intake process, whether it be from the city, whether it be from our COC partners, whether it be from any social service agencies within the city or even in the county. And they would do a kind of, I don't want to say an application, but it's just really a referral, right? Just submit as a referral on our website. And then we take that and we meet with that individual and see if this is actually a fit for them. Well, here, it is a HVAC system, so that's heating and cold. They have here, they're provided a meal every day for 7 days a week. Again, privacy, they have a key that they hopefully will feel that they own it temporarily, that it's theirs. They have free showers, free laundry that they can do. And again, it gives them an opportunity to just focus on themselves and not be distracted by any environmental challenges out there in the community, whether it be crime, whether it be noise. They can come here and feel safe because we provide 24/7 security. Magdala House, our CEO and our administration, we're very proud to be a partner with Mayor Jones and the city administration. It's proven in our 3 years being here. She supported us, and we first started off with 50 units, and she supported us with another 50 So definitely it's working. We appreciate the service that we provide, but just really the network of other supportive agencies seeing that what we're doing is making a difference to, again, mitigate or minimize the homelessness issue in our city.
A huge thank you to all of our guests today on the issues, and what you all are doing is very, very much needed. For more information, if you'd like to help, please see the information on the screen. I'd also like to say thanks to each and every one of you who tune into the issues and share your comments. And remember, you too can join the discussion. Log on to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, and don't forget to visit us on stltv.net. Be sure to tune in to our next edition of The Issues, where we'll have another informative topic that you definitely will not want to miss.